conspiring in that spirit to return here 102 years after the birth of Agostina Lato. A lot has happened in that period, and I'm glad we are returning to discussing special procedures and human rights defenders and civic space, which is where the story originally began. And I've been asked to, in some ways, look back and look forward on the trajectory of special procedures. I want to focus on the African context for reasons that will shortly become evident. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which is the framework, the institutional framework for this conversation, started off officially in 1987, although the African Charter was adopted in 1981 and came into force in 1986. But the first session took place in 1987. And the movement towards the first special procedure did not start until late 1994. What happened? The Rwanda genocide. That was the first trigger. And across the continent, most people who were active in the work on human rights believed that the human rights constituency failed Rwanda in the aftermath of the genocide. And at the African continental level, of course, the IPEC was set up, the International Panel of Eminent Persons, which delivered this report 2 years later under the title The Preventable Genocide. That report was submitted to the OAU there. But at the African continental level, the feeling was the African Commission could have done a little better in terms of human rights intelligence and early warning. And so the reaction was a suggestion to the African Commission to start working on the creation of and deployment of special procedures. Two immediately came to mind because as this was happening, we got into 1995, and then the killings of the Ogoni environmental activists in Nigeria happened. So two procedures were then proposed. One was a procedure on summary, arbitrary, and extrajudicial executions in Africa and on torture, and the other was on prisons and places of detention in Africa. In 1996, both effectively were authorized and deployed. The Special Rapporteur on prisons in Africa was the product of work by particularly Fiona Hunter at the Penal Reform International and myself. And then I worked with Ahmed Motala, whom some people here may know, in drafting the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on torture. Ahmed is still alive. Fiona sadly died 2 years after the deployment of the Special Rapporteur's mandate of prisons and places of detention in Africa. And relatively, the Special Rapporteur on prisons and places of detention in Africa worked well and did a lot of work in surveilling prisons in Africa, and indeed crossed over into aspects of torture of prisoners and people in detention. The Special Rapporteur on summary, arbitrary, and extrajudicial executions did not do as well. And some people would argue that that came down to the choice of the first Special Rapporteur, who then became a minister in the Tunisian government of President Zinedine, and Anybody, I think one or two people here whom I see may have witnessed the contretemps that happened between that particular special rapporteur and the former chairperson of the commission, the late Prosongema, at the prior session, where the chairperson told the special rapporteur that he had achieved zero in public on his mandate. I think in many ways that, and this was happening at the beginning of this millennium, that particular encounter then forced a review of the work of special rapporteurs at that time, about 2003, 2004. And in the aftermath of that review, special procedures at the African Commission were reconfigured. And before that, for the most part, we only had special rapporteurs. Thereafter, the tools were varied and variegated. So we then had the creation of not just special rapporteurs, but also working groups and committees. In many ways, therefore, what we are looking at is how the adaptations have worked. And the first point here is that special procedures are adaptive. They respond to circumstances. They respond to emerging challenges. And they are fashioned relative to the diagnosis of those challenges. In that context, the question can be asked, where have we succeeded? Where have we not done as well? And where are the gaps? And that's really what I'd like to try and look at, or at least make some inputs on. And as I've suggested, the mandate on prisons and places of detention in Africa has worked relatively well. The assessment was and remains that it has worked. And in many, that's surprising because not many people would have given prisons and places of detention a lot of prospects for success. But part of the reason it succeeded was that there was a supportive, complementary constituency of people working on prisons and places of detention who were willing to support the work of successive special rapporteurs, to provide intelligence and information, to provide reporting, complement their work, and accompany them with complementary advocacy. The special rapporteurs have also, the people who took that position have been focused in trying to make it work. The special rapporteur on free expression, freedom of expression has also been, by many standards, effective as well. That was subsequently updated and adapted to include a mandate on access to information. At the time that was created at the beginning of the millennium, we had about 5 access to information laws in Africa. Angola was actually one of them. South Africa was another. But really, and I think Uganda was a third, but we didn't have more than 5. Owing largely to the work of that particular mandate, supported by a network of NGOs that then got organized under the acronym of AFIC, the Africa Freedom of Information Center, which is now headquartered in Kampala, Uganda. Over the period between 2007 and 2020, we got 24 more access to information laws in Africa adopted across different countries. And so you can actually, in many ways, metricate, measure the kind of success that has been recorded from the work of the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression and Access to Information in association with the NGO communities who have supported that mandate. Now, as I said, the mandate of torture and EJ case has not been as successful. And I think the record of the first special rapporteur, Professor Hatem Ben Salem, dissuaded many more people from paying a lot of attention to it. In terms of effort, I think it's fair to say that the African regional system has paid considerable effort to implementation of its decisions, and there was a working group, I believe, that was set up on that particular point, which later became a committee. But the output on implementation has still not, and follow-up of decisions of the Commission has not been as fulsome as some people would wish to see. In the 1990s in particular, up for about 10 years from 1993 until about 2003-4, I probably did the highest number of cases, not probably, I actually did the highest number of cases at the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And I spent a lot of time going from country to country to follow up on the cases that I argued. And so, for instance, I did the John Modise case against Botswana. And when we got the decision in Modise from the Commission in 97, 98, I had to raise money to fly down to Botswana to begin negotiations with Vice President Festus Mogae there, because the presidency said we should negotiate with the Vice President. And Festus Mogae was then the Vice President of Botswana. And we went into negotiations on follow-up and implementation of that decision, and pretty much got every element of that decision implemented and then reported back to the Commission. I also did, incidentally, today is the election in the United Kingdom. In the case of Marete Bosch v. Botswana, the lawyer who led me was Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer is going to become the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom tomorrow morning. And Keir was then a QC at the bar in England and was the person who led me in arguing Marete Bosch's case. Marete Bosch had been accused of killing her husband in Botswana. She was a white South African woman. Her husband was a black Botswana. And when, after the killing, she was tried and convicted, there were procedural issues in the trial, we believe, and we took that to the Commission. We asked initially, pending final determination, we asked for interim measures of conservation to preserve her life and preclude execution, pending final decision by the Commission. We persuaded the Commission at a session, I believe in South Africa, to actually grant interim measures. The day after we got interim measures, Botswana killed her. And I then went from South Africa to Gaborone to meet with the Attorney General of and Justice Minister then of Botswana to find out why they had to do this. And he called me aside quietly and he said, you see, we have been killing black people here. If we refuse to kill a white woman, it will be that we have created a justice system for black people, and we are saying that white people are not supposed to be killed. That is why we killed her. This is summary of what he told me. But really, so implementation has been challenging, a little more challenging than free expression, because partly there are all these political, diplomatic issues that are not always evident in the arguments we make on implementation. I've also been involved, I've had a little more luck in the cases we've argued at the African Court, for instance. Ibrahim Khan, whom some people here may know, and myself did the case of against Botswana involving the killing of, against Burkina Faso, involving the killing of Burkina Faso's best-known independent journalists in 2014, 2015. And we got a judgment for over $2 million, as well as other measures of reparation. And Burkina Faso, under the successor to President Compaoré, paid absolutely every dime of that, including the $30,000 that were supposed to be for fees. They paid everything, and they actually did try to implement every dimension of that decision. And so with the African Court, we've had a lot more joy in implementation. The special procedure of the African Commission on Implementation is very active, it is working, and it could do with fuller collaboration from the states. There are states, however, that have done considerable work of that kind of collaboration, even though they don't get as much credit. I remember going to Cameroon, Yaoundé, about 10 years ago. And I had to meet with the Minister for Communication. And so we get to the ministry, and then get to the front office of the minister. And I introduce myself and say, this is what I'm coming to do in relation to in relation to a case affecting the African Commission. And the guy who was sitting at the desk got up. He could not control himself. He hugged me. He was kissing my cheeks. I was totally red and embarrassed. And this guy's name, he introduced himself to me. He said he is Abdoulaye Mazou. Now, everybody, anyone who knows the jurisprudence of the African Commission should please search. Even if you don't know it, search for the case of Abdoulaye Mazou. Abdoulaye Mazou was a magistrate in northern Cameroon who had been fired by the government of Cameroon. And he lost his job. For over 10 years, he could not be a magistrate anymore. And then he had no remedies in Cameroon, so he applied to the African Commission. And the African Commission required Cameroon to reinstate him in the job and pay him his arrears of salary. The year before I arrived Cameroon fully complied. They paid up his salaries. They did not absorb him into the magistracy. They redeployed him to the office of the Minister for Communications as a special advisor. That was the context in which I met him. As far as he was concerned, the African Commission was the best thing that had happened to the world since sliced bread. And so he facilitated absolutely everything I had to do with the government and the Minister for Communications, and made sure that we won the case that we were doing against the ministry. So these are, I'm just telling some of these nuggets, because a lot of people sit down and say, what do these regional human rights systems do? I've seen the worst. I've told you about the case of Botswana, but I've also seen some of the most spectacular outcomes. Norbert Zongo's case in Burkina Faso, Norbert Zongo being the journalist who was assassinated with his brother and his employees by Blaise Compaoré's government in 1998. Zongo's case would not have come to justice without a regional human rights system in Africa. No way. So these are some of the successes and these are some of the challenges. Now, where are the gaps? It seems to me, as I've said, special procedures are adaptable. So that's the wonderful thing about them. That said, they can also be confounding and confusing. As you've heard, there are about 44 mandates, special mandates now within the UN system. And it can be confusing just trying to understand all of them. In the African system, I think we have 14 or 15, and so there may still be some scope for reworking that architecture of special procedures. And some are missing. I mean, we've got special procedures on people living with HIV/AIDS. We've got on environment and human rights violations. We've got on rights of older people, death penalty, summary, arbitrary and extrajudicial executions, I've mentioned free expression, refugees and asylum seekers also, prevention of torture, economic, social, and cultural rights, indigenous peoples, women in human rights of women in Africa, and so on. Now, but it seems to me that on this continent, for instance, we ought to, I would argue that we could do with at least two more special procedures. One is on sovereign debt and human rights. Now, why sovereign debt and human rights? I don't have to explain to anyone here who is African why sovereign debt is a human rights issue. And a lot of our governments are binging on debt at the expense of citizens and at the expense of our collective well-being. But something else is happening. And I teach law and development, so I could go back to the history of contemporary sovereign debt in the aftermath of the Latin American debt crisis in the early 19th, the Mexican debt crisis in 19, because that's actually where the politics of structural adjustment began. The aftermath of the Mexican debt crisis in 1981-82. And it was after that the IMF and the World Bank invented structural adjustment for developing countries, and Africa then became a testing bed for that. And since then, a lot of our countries collect debt, and then, as we say in Africa, eat the money. We don't spend the money, we eat it. Now, and there's a difference between spending money and eating money. I'm sure you understand that. Now, so because our rulers in many of our countries eat the money, we are saddled as citizens and our children and grandchildren with debts that are no longer repaid. And human rights surveillance of both the quantum and expenditure of debt, but also the structure and documentation of debt and their consequences, it seems to me, is important. The African Commission and the African regional system could play a major role in affecting international policy making on precisely that, in a way that none of us can do. Institutionally, the authority of a regional human rights system bringing its voice to bear on that could actually make a difference, both to the governments contracting the debt and on the worth of the international institutions who syndicate this debt. There is something else that could also then become recursive, percolate down in ensuring accountability, debt accountability, so that in a country like, say, Mozambique, for instance, where that has become a major issue, where toxic debt has clearly shown itself as a major issue, the surveillance by regional human rights institutions can help the work of national organizations and indeed political bodies to ensure greater debt accountability and transparency. A second issue, it seems to me, is the question of corruption and human rights. Again, I mean, corruption is an issue by itself, and human rights is an issue by itself, but there is a zone of intersections that could do with better monitoring. Now, what we get across our continent is Transparency International. And Transparency International is headquartered in Germany, in Berlin. It's not going to love Africans more than Africans love ourselves. But the other thing is actually that the measurement of corruption by TI it does not measure corruption, it measures corruption perception. Corruption perception is not corruption. And so what do we think? A lot of people think there is more corruption in Africa than there is in Europe or North America. It's a lie. And again, in my law and development class, I have a full seminar on corruption. And when you look at the numbers, I'm Nigerian, and there is not, when you do corruption competition in Africa, the only country in Africa that we compete with is DRC. The two of us here, I think, carry the prize when it comes to corruption in our countries. But all the corruption in Nigeria and DRC put together is only a fraction of the corruption in the building industry in Manhattan in New York. Just Manhattan building sector alone. What is the difference though? When we steal from our own people, we send it overseas. When they steal from their own people, they keep it in their countries. If you steal from Wambo and you take it to Benguela, it is where? In Angola. But if you steal from Benguela and you take it to Venezuela, it is no longer in Angola. That is the difference. If the money remains in Angola, it continues to circulate. It will go to the cement distributor. It will go to the farmer. It will go to the tailor. It will get to the fish seller. And over time, there will be no loss to the economic system. But if you take the money from Benguela to Venezuela, you are diminishing Angola. That is the difference. How do we create systems, therefore, in which money from Benguela can go to Huambo or to Luanda, but does not go to Venezuela? That, in my view, human rights institutions can make a contribution. I will end with one more issue, which is, now, because we have a special procedure on economic, social, and cultural rights, I will not dwell on saying we need one specially on poverty, because in my view, economic, social, and cultural rights special procedure can address the poverty mandate skillfully. But given what we have and are experiencing on the continent at the moment, and in the context of the conversations we've had here this morning, I do think we may want to consider a special procedure on governance, participation, and on legitimate governance and participation, given the problem with unconstitutional changes in government. And that needs to now be tracked. That now needs to be monitored, and we can make a contribution to that from the human rights prism. And so I want to try and end by with just a general word. A lot of people feel overwhelmed. You know, the world is full of trouble. Whether you're looking at Gaza, or you're looking at Sudan, or looking at the Sahel generally, or maybe looking at Cabo Delgado, the Gulf of Eden, a lot of people are wondering, where will progress come from? And why can, you know, human rights is too burdensome. But you know, these things are about cycles in human time. You know, for those, I see there are even Catholic priests here. There is a Dominican here, and there is a Spiritan there. I don't even know where, there may be nuns here as well. So there are people here who are better lettered in the holy book than I am, but at least in one of the holy books. And there is a holy book that tells us there is time for everything, right? There is a time for inspiration, there is a time for perspiration. Yes? There is a time to be happy, there is a time to be sad. There is time to be high, and there is actually time to be low. If you don't experience a low, you will never appreciate your high. And we're in a moment globally of challenging times. Wherever you look, whether it is two men with an average age of over 90 trying to become competing to be president of the United States, or whatever. And you know, but you see, even as you look at these things, on the African side, I think it's important to count our blessings. Look at what has happened in South Africa, a dominant party that has had to be humbled by the people, negotiating power and creating a government of national unity at a time when democracy is challenged in the rest of the world. Right-wing parties sweeping to power in Europe and we in Africa trying to wrestle with making democracy credible. So remember this when you despair. When the white people came to us, they said our people were uncivilized because we were walking about naked and people were not getting raped. Yes, we were all naked, but we were happy and rape was not high. Yes, they said that was very bad, and so they started covering us with clothes, and we started wearing clothes, and we became happy wearing clothes. Everyone here now is wearing clothes, isn't it? Then white people discovered nakedness. So when the sun breaks out, this is the summer now, white people in Europe and America are going naked. You walk the streets, they're wearing these things, they're barely covered. And that was the nakedness of Africa that they said was uncivilized. Today we are covered, they are naked. They have discovered our civilization from the last century. Do you understand where I'm going to with this? They will come back to us to understand democracy. And the struggles that we are going through, as difficult as they may seem, as challenging as they may seem, will make us better people. They'll make us more resilient people. They'll make us appreciate the things that we have achieved. Some of us will not be here to see them. Just as I've mentioned Agostino Neto today, I remember that he's 102 years this year. Maybe 102 years later, some of you will be remembered in just the same way. But please don't give up. Don't think this will not get anywhere, because it will. African National Congress was founded in 1912. Things got worse. By the time of Polokwane in 1955, nobody believed that we will be having liberation barely 40, 50 years later. Barely 40 years later. In 1937, Europeans were writing that 1957, Europeans were writing that African independence would happen at the end of the century or later. We started getting independence in 1957 with Ghana. You don't know where the change you advocate for will get to, so don't lose your voice. And I'll end with this story. I went to Botswana to visit John. John was dying. We managed to get John's passport to him. Botswana had destroyed his life, made him stateless, ruined his family. John was dying and he told me, please, make sure this does not happen. John's case started in 1978. At that time, there were no remedies. At that time, there was no African Commission. There was no African Charter. By 2001, John had less than 2 years to live. In 2007, we managed to persuade Uganda under President Museveni to host a meeting, which I co-convened with Tajuddin Abdurrahim and Dismas Nkunda, to launch a demand for a continental statelessness convention for Africa. It looked mad. Nobody believed in it at all. 2 years later, Tajuddin was killed in a car crash in Kenya. We were only just drafting a protocol. This year, we have got the AU to adopt the protocol on statelessness, protocol to the African Charter. I drafted it. When I did, I was less than 40 years old. Today, I'm an old man. We have got that protocol in the books. It's going to benefit other people. By the time it benefits them, I'll probably be dead. That is how it works. Please, if you think there is a special procedure that is worth investing in, invest in it. Here you've got the chairperson of the African Commission and one who is interested in making the system work. We'll work with him, make the case. That special procedure may benefit someone who you don't know. And because that could happen, you must never, ever give up on advocating for that possibility. As long as that possibility exists, go for it. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, professor Cida. Vamos então passar à discussão e tem aí os microfones, ou tem aí os microfones. Quem quiser intervir, por favor, para permitir que não sejam poucos, vamos estabelecer aqui eventualmente 2 minutos para o comentário ou uma questão que quiserem levantar, por favor. Fiquem à vontade, não, por favor. Tem o Emílio também?
Guilherme Mozambique, a terceira divisão. Primeiro de tudo, agradecer a Sociedade, também, na verdade, o representamento e realmente o estudo. Nós gostaria aqui, então, de fazer algumas questões.
Guilherme? Aproxima só, por favor, o teu microfone. Sim? Ajuda-me? Sim, agora já pode.
Na verdade,
sim, Guilherme.
na verdade, queria aproveitar a oportunidade para fazer uma questão também à União Africana. O silêncio, muitas das vezes, que a União Africana faz quando há uma perseguição política, assim podemos dizer, sobre alguns ativistas, alguns jovens que, na verdade, não concordam com alguma posição, não concordam com uma ideia, muitas das vezes são perseguidos. A minha questão é qual? Como é que a União Africana de Direitos Humanos fica em silêncio e não diz nada, não fala nada? Por exemplo, aqui em Angola, estamos na questão de 4 jovens, né? 4 jovens presos, que até agora não ouvimos nada ou quase nada sobre um pronunciamento sobre a União Africana com esses humanos que estão presos. O último é, então, a conexão, né, o contato. Muitas das vezes, a relação que muitos grupos sociais têm com a União Africana é por intermédio. Não seria bom que a União Africana tivesse mais um contato mais formal, número de telefone, e-mail, para que a relação facilita, para que a relação torne-se mais fácil, porque muitas das vezes torna-se complicado, porque a relação que nós temos é por intermédio atrás, temos que, na verdade, chegar no ponto para atingirmos, então, assim, o nosso objetivo. Então, queria também dar esse ponto de vista que facilitasse bastante a comunicação. Se nós tivéssemos uma comunicação direta, ia, na verdade, facilitar muitos problemas e solução também, assim, de muitos problemas. Obrigado.
Obrigado, Emílio Mané, da plataforma Resolve. Há 2 questões que eu quero colocar. A primeira, para os nossos 2 relatores especiais. Nós temos um grande desafio, que é a implementação das recomendações dos mecanismos por parte dos Estados. Tem sido um grande desafio porque nós, como ativistas, levamos os casos aos mecanismos, os mecanismos emitem o seu parecer, mas os Estados são renitentes na aplicação da decisão ou da orientação do mecanismo. Então, temos aqui uma falha. Nós precisamos cada vez mais ouvir também um pouco do vosso lado, porque há dificuldade na implementação das recomendações. Para o ilustro professor, é sempre um prazer ouvi-lo. E há uma questão que tem sido pontual. Nós, a nível aqui da Angola, criamos uma plataforma para acompanhar a questão da dívida pública. O grande problema que nós temos encarado, e acho que hoje deu algumas pistas que eu tomei nota, é de fazermos um rastreamento da dívida. Porque dificilmente nós conseguimos fazer um enquadramento entre o investimento que é feito e a dívida que é contraída. E a outra grande questão está na responsabilização, e hoje colocou este ponto, que é na responsabilização dos atores públicos com relação à dívida. Angola, neste momento, 80% do que Angola produz já está comprometido. 60% do orçamento geral do Estado vai para pagamento da dívida. O país é gerido apenas com 40%. E hoje temos uma crise muito séria. Então, gostaria de dizer um pouco mais da sua parte, como nós podemos continuar a monitorar. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado. É sempre interessante, na verdade, termos esses encontros. De certa forma, isso poderão ajudar a dissipar algumas dúvidas. Eu gostaria... Desculpa, sou o mensageiro Andrade. Eu começaria por dizer que em 2020 a Frente Line Defenda publicou um artigo na qual afirmou que 301 defensores de direitos humanos foram mortos. E de lá para cá, praticamente o número tem aumentado. A minha preocupação é, tem-se feito vários encontros, mas infelizmente o número de perseguição e mortos continua a aumentar. Qual é a estratégia que nós poderíamos utilizar para evitar que muita gente seja morta, que muita gente seja perseguida? Nós, normalmente, quando organizamos manifestações, antes das manifestações, há muita perseguição. E há muita gente, por exemplo, a ser perseguida. Eu, particularmente, estou a lembrar, em 2016, quando os 15 mais 2 estavam presos, nós organizamos uma manifestação na província da Huila e o outro telefonema não parava de chamar e receber mensagens de ameaças de morte. Vamos te matar, já sabemos onde é que tu estás a influenciar as pessoas, por exemplo, se revoltarem contra o Estado. Mas acontece exatamente na altura em que há muitos seminários a acontecerem, mas as mortes não param, as prisões arbitrárias também não param. Muita gente praticamente está a ser perseguida. Isso faz com que aquelas pessoas que não estão do nosso lado tenham algum receio, algum medo de se juntar aos demais para que possamos ser muitos dentro dessa luta. Qual é a estratégia que a gente puder, de certa forma, utilizar? O que é que, na verdade, está a faltar? Também o nosso presidente acabou de dizer aqui que os Estados africanos, muitas vezes, não têm, de certa forma, cumprido aquilo que praticamente está estipulado. Eu queria saber o que é que a Comissão Africana tem feito para responsabilizar esses Estados. Porque muitas vezes é que se tem dito que o menor das boas ações é melhor do que o maior das boas intenções. Nós temos um Estado que muito se tem preocupado em fazer construções de discursos bonitos, mas infelizmente a prática tem deixado muito a desejar. É um Estado que está simplesmente preocupado em fazer construções de discursos bonitos, em que as pessoas têm estado simplesmente a aplaudir, mas a prática infelizmente tem deixado muito a desejar. O nosso presidente também acabou de explicar que quando há um determinado país que está com dificuldade, tem algum problema, pedem autorização. E se o governo não autorizar, eles não vão para aquele determinado país. Eu gostaria de saber, quando o governo não autoriza, qual tem sido a posição da Comissão Africana? E acabo por terminar, o nosso presidente também acabou de explicar que há tempo, na verdade, para tudo. E o que o nosso presidente acabou de explicar, praticamente não se aplica a um indivíduo, por exemplo, que está lá no Chipé. Um indivíduo que desde os seus 5 anos de idade até agora tem vindo a desenrascar para comer, vai dizer que só tem um tempo para a fome. Só mesmo há tempo para a escuridão. Eu vivo dentro de uma província da Huila, em que existem pessoas, por exemplo, que nos seus bairros, desde a criação do mundo, não sabem ver com uma lâmpada acesa. E se você disser àquela pessoa que há tempo para tudo, ele vai dizer não. Eu só conheço escuridão, eu só conheço fome. Hoje, por exemplo, dentro da província da Huila, tu não consegues andar 5 ou 50 metros a pé, sem vir uma criança, por exemplo, a pedir-te esmola, sem vir um adulto a pedir-te esmola. E se tu disseres àquela criança, àquela adolescente, àquele adulto que há tempo para tudo, ele nem sequer vai acreditar que há tempo para tudo. Ele conhece praticamente o sofrimento desde os 0 anos até os 80 anos de idade. Então não há tempo para tudo para aquela criança, é importante que passemos de pensólogos para praticólogos. Obrigado.
Bom, eu vou apelar aos colegas, por favor, para sermos sintéticos. 2 minutos mesmo, por favor.
Mais? We have 5. Yeah.
Sim.
Muito bom dia, boa tarde a todos aqui nessa sala. Chamo-me Alexandre Samuel Bolívar, ativista social, professor de direitos humanos, membro da Sociedade Civil Contestatária, SCC, um movimento cívico. Quero aqui dizer, como defensor de direitos humanos em Angola, não posso deixar de destacar que tenho experiências pessoais com consequências desse fechamento do espaço cívico ao longo dos anos. Enfrentei diversas formas de represália por meu trabalho, fui sequestrado e detido várias vezes, inclusive formas arbitrárias, como ocorreu pela última vez em véspera das eleições de 2022, sem qualquer crime cometido. Fui, não digo detido, fui sequestrado na minha residência pela Polícia Nacional. Eu quero aqui fazer o nosso proletário de denúncias, que a África é grande, temos poucas denúncias. Quero aqui fazer uma denúncia pública e quero que levem em consideração e pratiquem e façam qualquer coisa. Temos 4 ativistas cívicos, defensores de direitos humanos, denominados Tanais Neutro, Gildo das Ruas, Abraão Pensador e Adolfo Campo. Estão presos há quase 1 ano, ou há mais de 1 ano, e não se diz nada, completamente nada. A Comissão Africana não diz nada, as Nações Unidas não dizem nada, mas são ativistas que foram detidos na concentração de uma manifestação pacífica e ordeira. Concentração. Não era realização, só estamos ainda a se concentrar para a realização dessa manifestação. E os mesmos foram detidos, de lá para cá não se diz nada, o governo de Angola não diz nada, os órgãos de justiça em Angola não dizem nada. Esta é uma denúncia que eu quero que leve em consideração, já que não há denúncia, a África é grande, tem poucas denúncias, quero que leve essa denúncia em consideração.
Sou a Cecília venho do sul de Angola. Eu queria só apresentar a preocupação da lei, de uma proposta de lei que vai limitar o exercício das ONGs em Angola e também o exercício dos ativistas e defensores de direitos humanos. E gostaria que aqui a comissão, o presidente e aqui o professor que apresentaram os temas, levassem essa preocupação. Por quê? Porque vai pôr em causa todo o tipo de avanços que Angola já tem. Outra questão é a questão dos grupos minoritários. Eu venho do sul de Angola, a questão da fome vem alastrando-se desde 2012. A fome não espera, ela mata, ela é rápida. Não espera os consensos dos governos, nem dos ministros, nem dos sistemas regionais. Ela é rápida e deveria ser tratada como uma questão de emergência. Mas para Angola nós não estamos a conseguir. Tanto fizemos, algumas ONGs unidas em plataforma, tanto fizeram para que o presidente decretasse o estado de emergência, mas não conseguimos. E tanto estamos a lutar para que a questão da alimentação adequada faça parte do pacote dos direitos humanos, dos direitos básicos humanos. Também não estamos a conseguir. E como não estamos a conseguir, de lá para cá está a morrer muita gente e apareceu o fenômeno de refugiados climáticos. Nós sabemos que a Europa está com uma crise de refugiados. E aqui na África aumentou, para além de refugiados no seu todo, no seu geral, por causa de conflitos e de outras coisas, aumentou mais este paradigma de refugiados climáticos. O que a Comissão Africana pode fazer para poder influenciar os Estados a olharem mais para os problemas básicos e tentarem criar indicadores de progresso neste campo? Porque estamos vendo muita criança, muita mulher, e as mulheres ficaram guardiãs das suas aldeias e os homens foram-se embora.
Bom, vamos pedir ao presidente da comissão para responder. Acho que foi interessado em duas questões aí ao professor Cid.
Je vais encore exprimer ma gratitude à l'auditoire qui nous a suivis depuis ce matin. Remercier aussi mes panélistes avec qui je partage la table. Madame la rapporteure spéciale des Nations Unies et le professeur Chidi pour leur exposé de qualité. Je n'ai pas pu les remercier parce que j'intervenais en premier, mais je les ai très bien suivis. J'ai aussi beaucoup appris, beaucoup tiré de leurs interventions. 5 questions, je pense que la commission peut répondre aux 5. Mes collègues aussi pourront, panélistes pourront répondre. Alors, il y a 4 jeunes citoyens angolais qui sont en prison. Et vous ne regrettez, vous ne comprenez pas pourquoi il y a les silences de la Commission africaine et pourquoi il y a le silence de l'Union. Pourquoi il y a le silence de la Commission africaine dans l'homme de peuple et pourquoi il y a le silence des Nations Unies. Je répondrai sur le volet Commission africaine. Ne pensez pas que la Commission africaine est automatiquement informée de la situation des défenseurs des droits de l'homme chaque fois qu'il y a un problème avec le gouvernement. Il faut un canal d'expression, il faut un canal pour véhiculer l'information. Cet après-midi, on va écouter Anna Foster. Je vous ai dit que c'est l'une des meilleures spécialistes qui encadre la société civile sur ce continent. C'est avec elle que je mène depuis 3 ans, 4 ans, un travail important de mobilisation de la société civile lussophone. Je vous dis, il y a simplement 4 ans. Madame Anna Foster va donner les détails que vous paraissez dans le radar de l'Union africaine. La société civile lussophone était complètement inexistante. C'est pour ça que je voudrais rendre hommage à une femme courageuse comme Maria-Teresa Manuela, qui est rapporteure spéciale sur les prisons, conditions de détention en Afrique et l'action policière, qui a pris le courage, malgré ses charges énormes, de venir représenter la société, la communauté lussophone, qui n'est pas une région en tant que telle, mais à raison parce que les pays lusophones ne sont pas à un endroit géographique situé, ils sont éparpillés à travers l'Afrique, au centre, au sud et à l'est de l'Afrique. Qui a pris le courage de venir représenter cette communauté et faire entendre votre voix. Il en est de même de la société civile. Ça, c'est au niveau institutionnel, au niveau des hauts fonctionnaires de l'Union africaine, au niveau des élus. Et au niveau de la société civile, un effort devait être fait. Et nous avons fait, nous sommes partis avec Anna Foster. On n'est pas arrivé ici en Angola, mais nous voici maintenant ici en Angola pour vous mobiliser. Parce que vous étiez inexistant dans le radar, vous n'étiez pas comptabilisé parce que vous étiez absent. C'est pour cette raison que vous voyez aussi de l'autre côté, il y a eu un silence. Parce que si vous étiez dans le réseau aurait pu faire circuler l'information, remonter l'information jusqu'au niveau de l'Union africaine. J'en profite d'ailleurs, je ne l'ai pas dit, aujourd'hui que commence à germer, à exister un réseau des organisations de la société civile lusophone. Faites un effort, venez même solliciter très rapidement un statut d'observateur au niveau de la commission pour que non seulement vous soyez connus officiellement, mais aussi au cours de nos sessions où vous veniez parler. Par exemple, si ce réseau existait et si les ONG de la zone lusophone existaient, face à ce silence, un membre de ce réseau aurait fait le déplacement jusqu'à Banjul au niveau de nos sessions pour venir dire c'est 3 minutes, mais c'est beaucoup. Votre question, vous ne l'avez pas posée en 3 minutes. Voilà qu'en 3 minutes, vous avez dit 4 activistes sont en prison. Nous avons besoin d'une action de la commission. Tout ce que je peux vous dire pour l'instant, c'est qu'il mérite une protection du mécanisme que ceux qui ont commencé l'Union africaine avant nous, Chidi et les autres, avaient mis en place avant que moi je n'arrive à la commission en 2017. Ce mécanisme a été mis en place justement pour ce cas-là. Lorsque vous nous faites parvenir l'information, nous savons ce que nous en devons faire avec le gouvernement. Ce n'est pas un secret, je ne l'ai peut-être pas dit le matin. S'il n'y a pas d'infraction à la base, parce que parfois aussi on nous dit que des personnes sont arrêtées, mais il y a un problème, un conflit pénal. S'il n'y a pas d'infraction à la base, ils sont arrêtés que parce qu'ils ont fait le travail de défenseur des droits de l'homme. Nous écrivons au gouvernement. Et quand je dis nous écrivons au gouvernement, nous écrivons au président de la République. Parce que nous estimons que si on arrive déjà à ce niveau-là, c'est que le ministre de la Justice, le ministre de l'Intérieur, les autres ministères n'ont pas regardé aux dispositions de la charte pour pouvoir gérer adéquatement cette question. Nous envoyons une lettre d'appel urgent au président et nous en assurons le suivi. Ce que je vais demander pour le cas de ces personnes, je suis encore ici jusqu'à 48 heures, faites un rapport écrit avec le nom de ces personnes et surtout avec les faits exacts, les raisons pour lesquelles ces personnes ont été arrêtées. Et le reste, c'est notre travail. Nous allons faire un travail de diplomatie de droits de l'homme en adressant des lettres d'appel urgent et au besoin même en sortant d'abord préalablement un communiqué de presse de l'Union africaine indiquant comment ces personnes ont été arrêtées dans ces conditions-là. C'est très important. Ça signifie déjà que pour le pouvoir public, pour le gouvernement, c'est devenu un cas qui est connu sur le plan continental que nous ne pouvons plus gérer. Et rassurez-vous, maintenant qu'on le sait, chaque fois qu'on sera en contact avec le gouvernement, on leur dira. Pourtant, votre pays est présent. Votre pays est présent, je vous dis présent, aux travaux de la commission. Ils assistent maintenant presque régulièrement. Et je vois les autorités angolaises qui arrivent, mais je ne connais pas ce cas. Je ne peux pas le connaître par magie. Faites votre travail, transmettez-nous un rapport, nous ferons le reste. Et j'encourage le réseau lusophone à se structurer très bien davantage et à solliciter un statut d'observateur. Ça aidera beaucoup. Parce qu'en ce moment-là, vous prendrez ce cas, vous le confiez à votre réseau et le réseau prend et le communique au rapporteur spécial directement. Numéro de contact et email, c'est des choses très faciles qui vont être mises à votre disposition. Mon assistante, Madame Anita, est ici. Elle vous donnera mon numéro de contact et le numéro de contact de l'Union, de la Commission africaine qui est sur le site internet. Deuxième question, grand défi, c'est la mise en œuvre des recommandations. Vous dites ce que moi-même j'ai dit, hein, la mise en œuvre des recommandations des mécanismes spéciaux par les États. Vous avez dit ce que j'ai dit déjà. Notre boulot, notre travail, c'est de formuler des recommandations dans tout ce que nous faisons au gouvernement. Et le plus grand défi que nous avons, c'est l'exécution, comme disent les physiciens, l'exécution quantique. Donc, à faible taux, l'exécution minimaliste des États en ce qui concerne les recommandations. C'est ça la maladie du droit international, c'est ça la maladie, je vous ai dit, que nous partageons avec la Cour africaine. Les États n'exécutent pas parce que pensent-ils, ils sont souverains. Et souvent, lorsqu'on dit aux 55 pays d'Afrique que ce ne sont pas pour la plupart, ce ne sont pas des pays démocratiques, ce n'est pas parce qu'ils n'organisent pas les élections. Ça ne s'arrête pas à l'organisation des élections. La démocratie, l'état de droit, c'est quelque chose d'encore beaucoup plus vaste. C'est d'accepter les recommandations qui sont formulées à un niveau beaucoup plus important, à un niveau supérieur par rapport à une situation qui se passe sur le plan local. Ils disent, les États, les membres du gouvernement, il ne s'agit que des centres de recommandations. Nous sommes un pays souverain, nous n'allons pas suivre ça. Mais attention, une chose encore importante, c'est que les recommandations que nous formulons cessent d'être les recommandations de l'Union africaine, afin de la Commission africaine, et deviennent les recommandations de l'Union africaine. Je m'explique. Nous faisons des rapports pour les activités que nous faisons. Pour toutes les activités que nous faisons en tant que mécanismes spéciaux, toutes les activités des mécanismes spéciaux constituent le rapport d'activité de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et de l'autre. Et ce rapport d'activité est validé par les ambassadeurs, les 55 ambassadeurs d'Afrique au niveau du COREP. Il est validé à un deuxième niveau par les ministres des Affaires étrangères à travers le Conseil exécutif. Et il est autorisé, ce rapport est autorisé pour publication par la conférence des chefs d'État et de gouvernement. Ce ne sont plus des recommandations des petits experts indépendants que nous sommes, des petits commissaires que nous sommes, ça devient des recommandations endossées par la conférence des chefs d'État et de gouvernement. Je donne un exemple. Si nous recommandons que les 4 défenseurs de droits de l'homme arrêtés puissent être libérés, à ce jour, il s'agit de ma recommandation en tant que rapporteur spécial. Si ce n'est pas exécuté, moi je le laisse dans mon rapport. J'ai recommandé qu'on les libère. Ça passe à tous les niveaux, ça arrive à la conférence des chefs d'État. Ils regardent. Ils disent, ah oui, c'est des choses que nous avons acceptées, vous pouvez les publier maintenant. Ça devient une recommandation de 55 pays ou de 54 pays sur un seul pays. Alors, ne pas exécuter cela, ce n'est plus de l'état de droit, ce n'est plus de la démocratie, ça devient de la prétention. Je ne le dis pas pour l'Angola, je le dis pour tous les pays d'Afrique qui m'écoutent et qui n'exécutent pas les recommandations, que ce soit de la Commission ou des autres organes. Il ne s'agit plus des recommandations d'un organe, mais ça devient des recommandations de l'Union africaine sur une situation précise. La question de M. Andrada sur les menaces qu'il subissait et le nombre de défenseurs de droits de l'homme qui continuent à être tués, que faire? Ce qu'il faut faire, c'est un peu la réponse que j'ai donnée l'autre fois. D'abord, je compatis avec vous sur tout ce que vous avez subi comme menace, comme représailles. C'est quelque chose qui ne peut pas arriver. La défense des droits de l'homme n'est pas une infraction. Je le dis tous les jours. Il n'existe aucun code pénal au monde. S'il existe, vous me le donnez tout de suite, je change de discours. Il n'existe aucun code pénal au monde qui érige en infraction la défense des droits. Un code pénal qui dit est érigé en infraction est punissable plutôt tout acte d'un individu ou d'une personne morale visant la promotion ou la protection des droits de l'homme, donc visant la défense des droits de l'homme. Il n'y a pas de code pénal dans ce sens-là. Mais vous apprendrez toujours ça et là que des magistrats, que des services de sécurité poursuivent les défenseurs des droits de l'homme, les menacent de mort et les tuent même, comme c'est le cas de ce que vous avez dit, de cet article qui a été écrit sur les défenseurs des droits de l'homme, 300 qui ont été tués et dont le nombre continue jusqu'à aujourd'hui. Ce qu'il faut faire, c'est ce qui a déjà été fait, c'est-à-dire vous faire connaître en tant que réseau des défenseurs et rester en contact avec les mécanismes qui ont été institués au niveau de l'Afrique, nous, au niveau des Nations Unies. Il n'y a pas que madame, hein, comme elle est Special Rapporteur of Freedom of Association and Assembly. Il y a un autre rapporteur aussi qui s'occupe des Human Rights Defenders. Que ce soit elle, si ça concerne cette question, que ce soit une question qui concerne uniquement les défenseurs de l'homme pour d'autres activités, il faut continuer à nous associer. Parce que parfois même, pour renforcer la lettre d'appel urgent, on peut la co-signer à deux. On signe avec. Vous ne verrez pas vous-même à vous mobiliser pour avoir les Nations Unies et l'Union africaine interagir avec votre gouvernement. Mais nous pouvons le faire. Si le cas est vraiment grave, nous pouvons aussi nous mettre ensemble et écrire au gouvernement, comme nous le faisons. Les ONG le font aussi, mais c'est à des degrés divers, la manière dont ils prennent en considération ce que nous faisons et ce que font les ONG n'est pas la même. L'espace civique. Et ici, il y a des représailles en Angola, des gens qui se plaignent d'avoir été enlevés par la police nationale et les 4 activistes. C'était ça la 4e question. Je crois que pour ces 4 activistes, je vous ai déjà dit de nous fournir les éléments. Sur ce qui concerne la proposition de loi électorale, proposition de loi pas électorale, la loi sur la liberté d'association et de réunion, mon opinion est tout à fait simple par rapport à ça. L'Afrique a proposé une loi modèle, une loi type sur le Freedom of Association. Cette loi existe, elle est sur le site de la Commission. Je pense que Lucia peut mettre ça à votre disposition. Cette loi vise à ce qu'elle poursuit l'objectif suivant, permettre aux États qui veulent légiférer, parce que la Charte africaine n'a pas dit ce qu'il faut faire dans ce domaine, elle renvoie la question aux lois nationales. Lorsque les États doivent légiférer sur cette question, notre demande, c'est de faire en sorte que ça ne limite pas l'espace civique. Je le dis encore une fois ce matin, il y a des lois restrictives qui limitent l'espace civique en termes d'enregistrement, en termes de liberté d'association, en termes de liberté de réunion, en termes de financement. Ce n'est pas un problème qui concerne uniquement ce pays, ça concerne beaucoup de pays. Quel est le rôle de la société civile? Vous devez continuer à écouter, à travailler avec les parlementaires, leur montrer les limites des options parfois qu'ils choisissent sur le financement. Tout à l'heure, pendant les petits breaks, un journaliste m'a posé cette question-là. Je lui ai dit, et c'est par là où je vais terminer pour permettre à mes collègues d'intervenir aussi. Il parlait justement de l'Angola, je lui ai dit, écoutez, je ne vois aucun problème parce que même la commission ne l'accepte pas. Il l'a dit tout à l'heure. La société civile, les doctrinaires, les professeurs d'université sont en train de militer pour qu'on ait de nouveaux mécanismes spéciaux sur la lutte contre la corruption et sur la question de la dette exponentielle. Les pays africains sont hyper endettés et la dette est partie dans la poche des États. Tout ça, dans la poche des individus plutôt. Tout ça a un impact sur le gouvernement. Ce que je dis aux journalistes, c'est parce que la question que vous posez, et je le dis ici, c'est que je ne vois aucun problème à mon niveau qu'un État puisse lutter contre le flux financier illicite. Vous savez qu'il y a beaucoup d'argent qui dorment quelque part dans la nature à travers les instances financières qui n'attendent que des endroits pour être injectés et financer des activités. Il y a des gens qui ont l'argent, ils ne savent pas ce qu'ils peuvent en faire. Il y en a qui financent des causes justes, qui créent des fondations humanitaires. Il y en a qui financent des causes injustes, dont le terrorisme. J'estime que c'est légitime de la part d'un État que de devoir contrôler et de surveiller l'argent qui rentre. L'argent qui rentre dans un pays, c'est quand même quelque chose de légitime. Je serai ministre aujourd'hui en train de siéger dans un gouvernement, je ne leverai pas mon doigt pour dire un État ne peut pas surveiller l'entrée de l'argent. Non, ça c'est une prérogative qui revient à l'État dans le cadre de sa souveraineté. Mais ce que nous demandons seulement, c'est de tenir compte de la dimension de droits de l'homme dans cette surveillance financière-là. Ne pas surveiller ça de manière à ce qu'on puisse, n'est-ce pas, vider le contenu de certains droits qui dépendent de l'argent qui arrive de l'extérieur. Parce que si aussi les structures de la société civile recevaient de l'argent du trésor public, on ne parlerait pas. Il n'y aurait pas de débat. C'est parce que l'État ne peut pas non plus financer tout le monde. Ou bien finance des structures qui lui sont favorables que les gens sont appelés à capter l'argent à gauche à droite. Certains, peut-être, sont arrivés à capter de l'argent sale. Certains sont arrivés à capter de l'argent sale. Mais tout le monde n'est pas à être logé dans. C'est pas parce que certains, à un moment donné X, ont capté de l'argent sale à un endroit. Bien déterminé, bien situé, il faut mettre tout le monde dans le même sac. Surveiller, mais ne pas couper pour que les gens soient, c'est vrai financièrement qu'ils ne travaillent pas. Et comme je le dis, la société civile fait un travail important. C'est un travail de développement. Parce que leur rôle, c'est des agents de surveillance. C'est eux qui rappellent au ministre, vous avez tel plan stratégique pour tel secteur d'activité. Vous avez telle ligne budgétaire votée sur le trésor public avec autant de moyens. Mais in concreto, les écoles ne sont pas construites. In concreto, ce ne sont pas les fonctionnaires de l'État qui lutteront contre le ministre, pour le dire. Ils craignent la hiérarchie, ils craignent les sanctions. Mais c'est la société civile qui viendra dire, les écoles n'ont pas été construites. Les hôpitaux n'ont pas de médicaments. Les routes n'ont pas été refaites. L'éducation est en lambeaux. La circulation, le transport pose problème. C'est la société civile qui le fait. Et de ce point de vue, il faut le considérer comme des agents de développement. C'est ainsi que la loi que vous avez dans votre pays, il faut que ce soit une loi équilibrée. C'est tout ce qu'on va demander. Que ce soit une loi équilibrée. Si d'un côté, elle lutte contre quelque chose qui est maléfique pour l'État et pour les populations, mais de l'autre côté, il faudrait que cette loi puisse ne pas, que cette loi ne déforce pas, que cette loi ne puisse pas affaiblir la société civile, parce que sans ce financement, rien ne peut être fait. Si cette loi vise aussi, selon ce que j'ai compris, à limiter le droit à des manifestations, à couper vraiment, à instaurer un régime d'autorisation, ce n'est pas le standard de l'Afrique. L'Afrique est au standard d'autorisation et pas. L'Afrique est au niveau du standard d'information et pas au niveau du standard d'information. Le modèle que nous proposons aux États, ce n'est pas un modèle où chaque fois qu'il faut faire les manifestations pacifiques, ce que l'Union africaine propose, et même les Nations Unies, chaque fois que nous voulons que les organisations de la société civile veulent faire des manifestations pacifiques, qu'elles puissent informer le gouvernement, pas demander l'autorisation. Parce qu'en demandant l'autorisation, on finit toujours par contrôler et limiter encore l'espace civique par ce régime d'autorisation. Voilà ce que je peux dire. Et si vous comprenez bien mon discours, c'est un discours qui place le curseur au milieu, tenir compte des intérêts souverains des États, mais tenir compte aussi des droits de l'homme, parce que justement, tout ce que l'État fait, ça vise toujours les intérêts des humains, ça vise toujours les droits de l'homme. Les États ne peuvent, même si vous surveillez le flux financier ici, cela ne peut pas impacter négativement les autres droits de l'homme qui existent sur le territoire. J'ai donc amené un message de discours équilibriste. Je vous remercie.
Sociedade.
Sorry, Madam Cecilia, can you please repeat your first question?
A primeira pergunta é sobre a proposta de lei que o governo angolano está a levar a cabo para limitar as ações e o exercício da sociedade civil. E nós aqui dentro estamos a nos mobilizar e as Nações Unidas, uma das comissões das Nações Unidas também já se pronunciou sobre essa proposta de lei do governo angolano, mas não temos nenhum pronunciamento da Comissão Africana. E esta é a minha inquietação. Estamos mais próximos aqui na região e não temos esse problema. Outra, eu acho que é só a primeira, né?
Cecília, mas essa questão direcionas ao professor Cid ou ao presidente da comissão?
Os dois, quem tiver alguma opinião.
Ok. A outra questão qual era, Cecília? A outra questão.
No, I have the other question.
Ah, ok. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam, and thank you also to all the colleagues who have intervened and to my colleagues here on the podium. All I can do is let me just try and start from the last intervention. Largely, again, because the Holy Book says that the last shall be the first. Huh? So, if we were to start from the last, we shall be the first. There are two questions by Madam Cecilia. One is this thing, I should confess I've not seen the draft law, and therefore I don't want to comment on a law that I have not seen as such. What I therefore want to say about it, to the extent that I can say anything, is broad and methodological. First of all, Angola has ratified the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. It's also ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And within the doctrinal system of Angola, these are also domestic law, because ratification is preceded by legislative action. And it's only Parliament that authorizes the executive to ratify here. So those two instruments are domestic law in Angola. As a matter of legal standard, therefore, Angola cannot just legislate within the confines of its constitution. Any law on the operations of NGOs has to also be compatible with the provisions of both the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. But there is one more thing. Angola is also party to the treaty establishing the Southern African Development Community, and as well as to the common market of East and Southern Africa. That means, because you see, NGO operations, a lot of people don't know this as a matter of law and don't think it as a matter of law. When you legislate on the work of NGOs, you're actually affecting company law. And you're also affecting free movement of capital, because NGOs actually trade in capital. NGOs work with money. Well, Kutakesa, to organize this meeting, needed money to rent this hotel, to hire these things, and all of that. Yes? So you're not just going to have to comply with human rights law. We all know that. You also need to comply with international economic law, regulating companies and regulating free movement of capital within a regional integration arrangement. Now, this has implications for all of us, because a lot of us who are human rights advocates just confine ourselves to understanding human rights law. We need to be a little more expert in understanding the laws that govern international movement, factor mobility. And by factor mobility, I mean the factors of production: land, labor, capital, management, and information. Those are the factors of production. When you tamper, let me repeat myself, when you tamper with NGO law, you have to comply there are two regional integration arrangements that affect Angola. One is SADC, the other is COMESA. And SADC has a court in Gaborone. COMESA has a court that has now been relocated from Khartoum to Lusaka. And we need to be able to use these to put pressure on domestic systems so that they know, at least if they have to oppress NGOs, they will have to work to a higher standard of skill in order to be able to make it lawful. The other thing I would add, you make the point about food security, hunger, and climate change. All of these are human rights issues. How we deal with, and a lot of our countries are not yet where, Angola is still largely reliant on hydrocarbons. It's an oil economy. And the implications of the energy transition and of climate adaptations for the country have not yet been worked out. For a lot of us Africans, all of these things are not new. Climate change is not new. And anyone who has lived in an African village will know that in every one of our communities, and all of us here know it, whether it's Colombia or DRC or Nigeria or Angola or Mozambique, Zimbabwe, wherever you come from, all of our rural communities have had sustainability practices. Again, like nakedness and clothes, it is actually the Europeans who are learning from us about climate change. We had mechanisms for maintaining our forests, for conserving our land, for making sure land was not denuded and land was actually used in a way that was sustainable. We had mechanisms for governing all of these things. So when Europeans bring climate change to us today, it sounds new. Let me, in my own language, Igbo language, for instance, back in rural Nigeria, we had a word for climate change before the Europeans invented it. It was called Elu Ogeya. Okay? This was way before Europeans found the map to Africa, or found their way to Africa. And because of Elu Ogeya, we had mechanisms for making sure that when that happened, we were ready, and our food security did not suffer. So I would also recommend to those of us who are interested in energy transition and climate change to go back to our roots and let us begin to understand a lot of those practices and begin to make them the subject of proper legislation and documentation. One of my students is researching from New Zealand now, is researching the rights of nature. The rights of nature, in a lot of our countries, nature has rights. There are things you cannot do. And so what did we do? In customary society, we deified nature in order to preserve it. So forests were seen as shrines. And because they were shrines, you could not cut them down. And because you could not cut them down, you conserved them. You preserved them. And we made sure that they were there from generation to generation. But then the Europeans came to tell us that if you deified a forest, you were an idol worshiper. So we started destroying our forests. Today we need climate change. So you see, we need to go back to understanding who we are and where we come from. And don't believe every European when they tell you this thing you're doing as an African is wrong. It is a lie. Be very careful to the kinds of Europeans you listen to. That's exactly what I'm saying. Now, about the chairperson of the African Commission has dealt with the issue of human rights defenders, and I can't improve upon that, and he's got the mandate as well. But you see, a regional human rights institution is not a magician. To be effective, we've got to engage it and engage it effectively. And it's a skillful process of careful management. In Nigeria, when the military were in government, they closed down every avenue of remedies, and we ended up, the only place we had to go to was the African Commission. And over the decade between 1992 and about 2003-04, that was the only place we had to go to. We managed to use the African Commission very effectively in that period to win a lot of victories. And for societies that are experiencing a closing civic space, the African Commission does offer mechanisms that you may not understand. Zimbabwe also tried it. For instance, the Zimbabweans did not take the African Commission seriously until ZANU-PF really closed down everything. Then the Zimbabweans became very avid users of the African Commission. And then the Zimbabwean government discovered they had to elect somebody to the African Commission. So they sent Victor Chigovera there. who used to be Attorney General of Zimbabwe. And so now Zimbabwe takes African Commission very seriously. Algeria also did the same. They didn't take the African Commission seriously until 1995, not 2005. 1995, adopted a resolution against the Algerian government in Togo, April 1995 in Togo. When they adopted that resolution, Algeria, until then, had not been taking African Commission seriously. Condemnation of what it was doing seriously. You know why? It was coming from the Human Rights Committee. And as far as it came from Human Rights Committee in Geneva, Algeria kept doing one thing. It kept denouncing France. It said everything Human Rights Committee was doing was being orchestrated by France. And France should understand colonialism has ended. Algeria is now independent. Once the African Commission adopted a resolution against Algeria, Algeria's strategy changed. Why was that so? It could no longer accuse Africa of colonizing Algeria. So it had to change its stand. What did it do? It got an Algerian elected to the African Commission. His name was Kemal Rezak Barra. Within 5 years, Commissioner Barra became the chairperson of the African Commission. Algeria attends every session of African Commission since Lomé in 1995. There is one thing, you may not understand it, but African countries take African condemnation seriously. They will not, as long as it's from Europe, they are not worried. Europe colonized Africa, they are wrong. That is the answer. But when it comes from Africa, we do bother. That is why you need to take African institutions seriously. We may not look like we are big, but we are effective when it comes to the kinds of things the African Commission is established to do. And that is why I would encourage those who are interested to please engage it skillfully. Engage it with information. Don't just think because things happen in Angola, the African Commission will sniff it out and know it. No. And now you have a commissioner from Angola. And by the way, Lucia is half commissioner. Where's Lucia? Where's Lucia, by the way? Lucia is an institution on the African continent. I'm telling you the truth. No other person, few people on this continent can organize this meeting. No, this is the truth. There are few people on the African continent who can organize this meeting. Bring the chairperson of the African. I don't go to South Africa. When the South Africans invite me, I tell them I will not come to your country. Lucia, I will come to Angola 100 times if Lucia invites me 100 times. That is the difference. So please, if you cannot get to the African Commission, go to Lucia and tell her we need action on this. She is a half commissioner of the associate commissioner of the African Commission. Seriously. Now, and about debt monitoring, by the way, debt is a very technical issue. And I would suggest if you don't do any other thing, coordinate with the regional and international networks on debt. Because it's very technical, and debt quite often is a matter of contract law. It's the agreement the country reaches with the debt providers. So now the advocacy at the moment is to be able to relocate that from contract law to public law and public international law. That will take some time to materialize, and that requires skills and information. And this is where the international human rights and regional human rights bodies can help. Because when they get engaged with it, they start creating material on the basis of which we can make public law arguments. As long as this is a private law argument, it will be governed by rules of privilege of contract. If it is public law, we can then begin to engraft onto that argumentation other considerations that deal with the public good. And that requires us, therefore, to tap into the networks of information and advocacy available. For instance, the Debt Global Week of Action. Third week of October is the Global Week of Action on international debt, on sovereign debt. It's important, for instance, to be part of that. We also have the African Sovereign Debt Justice Network. which is specifically targeted on Africa. But most of our countries, bar none actually, maybe with the exception of South Africa, but nearly every country in Africa is suffering under the burden of unsustainable debt. The implication is our currencies are diminishing, real earnings are diminishing, poverty is rising, immiseration is rising, the public good is being diminished and destroyed, and the sustainability of our races is also affected. Oh, by the way, cost of money is much higher, access to credit is completely wiped out, and that means, therefore, that poorer people are being driven into greater poverty. Businesses are collapsing. Small scale, medium scale, micro scale industries can no longer expand to hire people. Unemployment is therefore rising. The implications are spectacular. So, and even if you cannot monitor the numbers, you can report on the human rights consequences. And to make that effective, the regional networks are necessary. I'll yield there. Thank you very much.
Sheila?
Yeah, I have many things to say, but then as the time is
Yes.
little, what I would like to do is perhaps just to keep my answers to the next session when we are after Hannah's presentation on that. So perhaps that is good. The only thing that I'm going to say regarding debt is that the special rapporteur on debt is coming to Angola on an official visit from the 8th of July to the 17th of July. Perhaps for the people who is interested in that topic, that engagement is very important. And then the idea then is after that meeting, after that visit, well, engaging with her also in the recommendations and how to do a follow-up on that, because that will be, if she is coming and you are bringing that topic, is because there is like an articulation between the need and the response of the system. But for now, then I can take like some of my views on the questions when we are in the session.
Bom, estamos, então, vamos aproveitar para fecharmos o dia, ou neste momento à tarde, hoje amanhã, com duas projeções. Vamos ter a Hannah Jona Forrest, que é a diretora executiva do Centro Africano de Estudos sobre Democracia e Direitos Humanos. E depois vamos ter a Corle para falar, que é a diretora executiva também do Instituto de Direitos Humanos da África do Sul. Vamos ter essas duas preleções e terminamos aí, espero bem, pelo menos até às 14 horas o máximo. Vamos fazer sim, 14 horas o máximo. Temos uma hora basicamente para essas duas preleções e interações. Prof, thank you. Vice President, thank you. Gina? Yeah. Tanto por agora? Yes. Vamos. Yeah, it's open for now. Vamos ter agora então a Forrest e a Corle. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, yes. Just along. So, start now.
Yes, I left all my stuff there.
Bom, como disse, temos a Hannah Forrest, que é a diretora executiva do Centro Africano de Estudos sobre Democracia e Direitos Humanos, que vai falar sobre a exploração das funções e responsabilidades do mandato da Relatora Especial das Nações Unidas, estratégias e melhores práticas para a organização da sociedade civil e defesa dos direitos humanos, colaborarem com a Relatora Especial. Vamos ter depois uma visão geral do mandato da Relatora Especial da Comissão Africana, incluindo o seu papel como ponto focal sobre represálias e presidente do grupo de trabalhos sobre liberdade e associação na África, ou em África, métodos eficazes para organizações da sociedade civil e defensores dos direitos humanos trabalharem com a Relatora Especial. Portanto, vamos ocupar esta uma hora que nos resta com essas duas profissões. Boa tarde. Please.
Thank you very much. Let me confess that I didn't know I was presenting now, but I will attempt to give a brief of the mandate of the Special Rapporteur and how we came to be part of the working group. Perhaps I'm not too sure whether they are aware of the Forum of NGOs and how it was through the Forum of NGOs that we've been able to involve civil society in the work of the African Commission. That's another presentation. But I'm just going to zero in to tell a little bit about the story of how we got engaged in working on the mandate of the Special Rapporteur, that Freedom of Association and Assembly. We do know that it became a very important issue when there became a rise in the arrest, detention of human rights defenders. And one of the working groups of the forum started putting together stories, starting putting together experiences of human rights defenders and how they've been treated. So one of the resolutions was that the African Commission should come up with that particular mechanism. And that mechanism, we said, okay, but before it does, the African Commission needs to work with civil society to come up with the terms of reference. And so we had a working group under the leadership of Ren Alapini Gansu, and we were able to have the sub-regional focal points of the forum work together with the Special Rapporteur to come up with a situational analysis. What is happening in relation to freedom of association and assembly? And we also were able to bring in other colleagues and other partner organizations that we are working on freedom of association and assembly. We expanded it to also look at the other of the four freedoms: the freedom of religion, freedom of opinion, freedom of expression. So we brought them all together. And we had a couple of meetings, consultative meetings. And that was how we were also able to bring in ICNL, because ICNL also does a lot of work in that area. And we came up with the study. It took a while, but we were able to go through it, and the African Commission was able to adopt it. But we found that it was not enough. We needed to go a little bit further. And that was to prepare guidelines, because we found out that in some countries, you need to ask for permission to protest. In other countries, you don't. But even if you don't, there is also the likelihood that you will face police force. Yes, the use of force by security officials. So we felt that that was also something that we need to take into consideration. And the guidelines were developed. It also took a while because of the consultations. But at the end of the day, we came up with the guidelines. And we've been using the guidelines to facilitate the work of the Special Rapporteur in the person of Commissioner Ngoy. And what was also interesting was the fact that we even had to have the different members of the working group. We had in-country training. For example, in the Gambia, we had some very archaic laws in relation to association and assembly. And we used it to work with the National Assembly to organize training on the use of the guidelines. And it was during that time we were also able to convince them that they need to put into place a committee on human rights and constitutional arrangements. So we were able to launch that particular committee. And today it's functioning as well as they believe it should, although we do have some question marks. And we had most members of the working group were also able to organize national and regional workshops to encourage the use of the guidelines. And this is one of the ways that civil society has been engaged in the work of the African Commission and also in the development of mechanisms. Most of the mechanisms, initially, it was like was previously mentioned, there were special rapporteurs. But as we went forward, working together in the forum, we felt that there was enough experience and expertise among civil society to help the commissioners, to help the African Commission. Because I'm sure we all know that they are human. There are only 11 of them. And they're supposed to work in all the 55 African countries, 54 minus Morocco. But then it was also important for us to recognize the fact that the promotion and protection of human rights is a collective responsibility. And we cannot, if we do have the knowledge and the skills, the experience and the expertise, we should also be doing our own. And if you look at the development of the mandates as far back as the 1990s, even the first mandate of the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, you will see that it was civil society that even developed the mandate of the Special Rapporteur, working together with a key commissioner and then having it adopted by the African Commission. And that went through even in 2002 when we worked on the Robben Island guidelines, and that was to do with torture. We called the document, it was previously called the follow-up committee on the Robben Island guidelines, because when it was adopted in 2002, it was felt that there was need for the committee to work closely with the mandate of prisons. And what was also interesting was under the collaboration of the Addis Ababa roadmap, we also found out that it was very crucial that there was collaboration between the Committee on the Prevention of Torture, which is the follow-up committee, to work with the SPT, that is the subcommittee of OPCAT, and because they do have mandatory visits, and they can also carry out supervised visits, or they can unannounced visits to countries. So, and then for the Committee on the Prevention of Torture, we had challenges because the committee cannot visit a country without permission from the state, whereas the SPT could. So that collaboration was also very useful in making sure that anytime there is a mission to Africa by the SPT, there was also space for members of the Committee on the Prevention of Torture was also invited and had access to information that they were seeking in their work. It's just like something that we are experiencing at the moment. You find out that there are times that the mandate holders are not allowed to visit. They are not here on official visits. But these academic visits, solidarity visits, are very useful in making sure that they have a taste. Because without this academic visit, I don't think these mandate holders will have access to the information, first-hand information from those who are experiencing, those who are seeing what is happening on the ground and sharing it with them. And some of these participants do not even have access to come to Banjul or to where the African Commission is going to be held. So to come back to the Freedom of Association Assembly and the importance of the Addis Ababa roadmap in bringing in these two mandate holders that are working on association and peaceful assembly, I think is very crucial. And this particular mandate does have a lot of work to do. I'm sure some of us have been following the do not have access to, or even the intelligence to get information on what is happening on ground. So the collaboration between the mechanisms, the mandates, and civil society is very key. When information started coming out, you find out that you are like, okay, who do I contact? You have information, but as civil society who are supposed to be sharing this information, you need to be able to reach out to one or two people, reliable people who will give you accurate information so that you're able to make sure that you get the wheels of information going out, getting to the mandate holders, getting to the relevant people in country, out of the country, and also being able to make sure that at least a remedy is being worked on as quickly as possible. The two mandates, I believe there have been very successful stories in terms of making sure that they are able to, because even when Minor was there, we had pushed him to do something on vulnerable groups, because those are the ones who face the challenge. Because if you do know your rights and you are able to stand up, sometimes the perpetrators, it takes time for them to actually approach you. When we started working as a group, the forum has 5 sub-regional focal points, and as the chair had indicated earlier, we also have developed a Lusophone network since 2019. And they've been trained, and they've also been, and today at the African Commission, they're able to produce their reports, the reports of their countries, alternative reports. They are also able to stand up and make statements. Some of them have even gotten observer status, which was not happening. But we are, I see Emilio smiling, but no, they should not rest on their oars. There is a lot more work to be done, because we know that Equatorial Guinea in the Lusophone network is a bit quiet. You know, Guinea-Bissau is trying, but Cape Verde is also trying, but you need to be able to come together. Because if Angola is doing well in the area of freedom of association and assembly, and Mozambique is a bit towards a bit of conservatism, I think we need to be able to bring in these activists together to learn. I would have loved to see some of the other participants from the other Lusophone countries here, and also from other Anglophone, yes, there are some of us here, but French-speaking countries, so that we are able to experience, share the rich experiences. We have rich experiences in Burkina Faso, in Mali. Civil society have been very active. Yes, the Commission will not move if us as civil society do not stand up and push them. Yes, the states, because they are in the middle. The states want them to do what they want. But we are not telling them to do what we want. We are telling them to do what is right, what is in their statutes, what is in the African Charter. That is what we are asking them to do, to promote and protect the rights of the citizens of Africa. As such, you find out that we are calling on their conscience, the conscience of the commissioners, the conscience of the mandate holders, to do the right thing. And sometimes it's not too easy. And we've seen it in Zimbabwe, when Zimbabwe had their call. And it was problematic. How? Because at that point in time, the state of Zimbabwe was very aggressive. They want to make sure that we don't even call the name of Zimbabwe with anything. And those of you who were coming out of Zimbabwe to the African Commission sessions, you experienced the wrath of the state of Zimbabwe. Even those who were assisting were also in the line of fire. We remember that session when the report of the African Commission was rejected by the heads of states and governments because a visit was made to Zimbabwe and the report was sent to them. They refused to look at the report until it was too late and the report went, and they objected at the Assembly of Heads of State and Government. The report was sent to them, they never acted. But when it got there, they blocked it. So now the heads of state say it has to go back for them to commit. And that was also something very problematic. We see that the mandate holders also come under a lot of fire. So we have to make sure that we are on our toes to know what is happening and how we should be able to help them. The independence of the commission. I don't know how many of us are following the work of the commission, but it is important because if the commission is working for us and the mandates that we are interested in, the mandate of human rights defenders, the mandate of freedom of speech and assembly, the mandate of prisons, the mandate of torture, amongst others. It is important that we are well versed in any information. We have to make sure that the information is factual. We have to make sure that, because some of us have got into the line of fire. Angola, they've arrested and killed a number of human rights defenders. In fact, 3 of them. One is this person, that person, that person. And then you receive a letter. You, Hannah, you always tell us these stories. Who told you? What do you expect me to do? And immediately I go deaf. Yes, because it is not their business where I got the information from, but it is their business to tell us whether it's true or not, and to make sure that they deal with the issue, with the subject. So turning into whistleblowers does not help, because we've seen people who've gone and told stories about other human rights defenders, and before you know it, karma caught up with them, and they have to now come back to their colleagues to be defended. So we as human rights defenders, I believe we've got a lot of work to do, and a lot of it depends on our integrity. If we are to make impact on the work of these mechanisms, we have to be very cautious. We have to make sure we have the right information, the specific information. We document that information, and it is not to say it was Colette who told Hannah. No, it is not your business who told me to be able to say it at the opening ceremony of the commission. It is not your business. So long as the information is true, it is for the state to tell us whether they did it or not, and to exonerate themselves. The rest should be history. So let me reiterate this point before I conclude. The mechanisms were developed with the participation, with the contribution of civil society. But to make them work, civil society has to put in more effort. They have to work harder to make sure that they provide the meat with which these mechanisms can make impact. If we do not, then they become mere offices, like the one that Chidi mentioned, the one on extrajudicial executions. That particular mechanism has been in place for how many years? For over 2.5 decades or so, but it has not made much impact. We remember we used to look forward to receiving the report in which the mandate holder would say, you see, my report is going to be very short. He said, everything you see is human rights. So it's difficult to start saying about extrajudicial, because in the country where he came from, they were carrying out extrajudicial executions. And because he was an appointee of the government, he was afraid to say anything. And today, if we see a commission, an African commission, without some of these government appointees, it was because civil society kicked against and said it is incompatible with the work that we're expected to do, to be a minister or to be a representative, an ambassador of the government. Yes, it was difficult in the beginning, but the campaign got ground. And today you cannot see a minister of any state becoming part of the African Commission. So we have to keep our eyes open, and we have to make sure that we take seriously the role that we want to play. If we are talking about association, whether we are talking about assembly, these are key, and they hinge on every action that we carry out in the work that we do. It is key that we are able to provide the information. Yes, these things, insofar as they happen in Africa, I want to also posit that it happens in the global village that we live in, as Gina has already indicated. We've seen it happen. Last week I was in Geneva, and there was a panel on Eritrea. There's also a lot of freedom of assembly, extrajudicial executions. But then for them, they have refused. They've refused that the independent expert gets into Eritrea. And this has been happening for a very long time. It's the same with the fact-finding mission on Sudan. I was there for the presentation of their report, and that was one of the things that was out there in their interim report. So in the absence of these mandate holders having access to information, I think it falls squarely on us as civil society on the ground to make sure that information, relevant information, that important information that would make a difference in the lives of victims and survivors are given and made available to the mandate holders. So I would urge you, each one of us, we do have it's a collective responsibility to take our work very serious. Yes, we've pushed for the mandates, but we also have to make that the mandate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm really grateful to be here. After a long time, I think, to see myself in Angola as sitting on the podium with Hannah Foster, my sister here, and I'm so grateful as well to the special mandate holders that were here with us, that have made time to be part of this important process. UN Special Rapporteur and African Commission Chairperson on Human Rights Defenders. And I want to congratulate the conveners, Putakesha, the partners, Mosaiko. We've heard so much about you and Asha. I think these are the long-standing partners of IJPD. This organization, it's under the leadership that has been exposed, that has been doing what Hannah has mentioned, working at the regional level and bringing this expertise in Angola. So thank you for coming, and the expert as well that attended from the region. So my presentation, Hannah has made it very easy. She has given the background. I think when we look at freedom of association and assembly, I think, as she has mentioned, that it facilitates other rights. It is the hallmark or the cornerstone. Others is the cornerstone of our democracy. Without this right, our democracy is shunned. Our democracy does not succeed, because then the proponent of these rights are not enjoying the benefits that attached to it. So we came in working in this mechanism for many years, and coming in with maybe our qualifications from university, but no background whatsoever. And we're learning together. I know even Professor Chidi, him as well, I think Hannah Tukumbo Ige, Ibrahim Khan, and Ahmed Mutala, those were like our professors. They were doing a number of researches and making sure there's access. So us engaging with Kutakesha now, before the leader of this Kutakesha was heading Ajapere. At the time, the Commission adopted a resolution in 2009. That is the resolution that Hannah spoke about, that recognized the need, to address the reprisals that were affecting human rights defenders, civil society, particularly those that were dealing with governance issues, those that were exposing corruption, those that are speaking, promoting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So the reports of the Commission from civil society, it was just too overwhelming. Now the process of developing a mechanism to protect defenders and civil society from 2019, without resources, without support from member states, civil society, there were about 6 or 7 that worked together from sub-regions, working with the African Center, that always have to look for resources, and sometimes donors' doors get shut. We don't know for what reason, but we were now working with our own resources and now making meaning and understanding of the African Charter itself, particularly Article 45. And by 2017, we had done, and we produced, as she has said, the guidelines on freedom of association and assembly. Those guidelines adoption, I think for us, it was like, wow, we have done it, and it's time for us to relax. Freedom of association and assembly will be respected. However, we realize that these guidelines are not popularized. Many are not familiar with the state parties, the civil society. So we had to come back again as now we are now referred to as a support group member. How do you make impact? How do you make these guidelines known on the ground so that people can use them? So we translated them in AU official languages. We've got Portuguese version, English, French, Kiswahili, and what language have I forgotten? But those are the languages that we have. However, many people still did not understand, even member states, because we've seen in Zimbabwe, we've seen in Zambia, we've seen in Malawi, and now in Angola, that these processes of developing laws continue to take place. And the way it happens in an arbitrary manner. There is no proper consultation where people, citizens or human rights defenders are called forward to engage member states so that they come with the laws that respect the treaties that have ratified. So the guidelines support member states. It gives them steps that they can follow and how to go about ensuring that they are incorporating human rights in their laws. Now, all these laws that we have in the bills, some have to be signed. They've happened in exclusion of a familiarization or of reflecting on the guidelines. Now, this is where civil society needs to come in. I am very happy about this gathering, because it means the civil society in Angola, you are reflecting on what is happening in terms of conducting the assemblies. What are the process that the citizens need to take before they organize an assembly? How many people are required to be in an assembly? And what does the African Commission guidelines stipulate in terms of the processes that needs to be followed before you can conduct an assembly? We've seen law enforcement, even in South Africa, using excessive powers. Many people have been murdered, others have been injured, others have been arbitrarily arrested, being charged, despite the fact that we have these guidelines. The guidelines provide an opportunity for state parties, especially law enforcement, to take account, protecting the rights of women, persons with disability, the elderly, persons that are vulnerable to participate, because participating, as Hannah has said, as a citizen in an assembly is internationally recognized. There's absolutely nothing wrong that you are doing. The Universal Declaration, it recognizes all of us with that duty. We have the duty, the responsibility to play a role as citizens. So what we are doing is already established. There is no need for member states to behave in a manner that they're behaving. Now looking at the registration of association, I think during 2014, Hannah, we were here in Angola coming to support, and the African Commission was holding a session. And we could see the resistance, the efforts that were really trying to restrict participation of human rights defenders. The Commission was actually intimidated because some of the organizations were informed that you should not speak inside the session. And that time, the officials from Angola, they were showing this hostility. That hostility was so blatant that those who dared to speak about what was happening in the country, they will have a walkout. And some of them did that. But I remember the statement that you drafted, Hannah, on behalf of the NGOs, led to the adoption of 2 resolutions, very progressive resolution, the resolution that protects the rights of persons, sexual minority groups, resolution 2775, and resolution 273, for protection, for member states to protect the rights of citizens, the human rights defenders, and actually to have a law, and for the special rapporteur to document reprisals and to present this inside the session of the African Commission. Now I want to congratulate you Angolans that we are now, that was in 2014, it's 2024. 10 years ago, we were here in this country and you were supported. These are the mechanisms that you need to champion yourself. You need to read, go deeper in it. I know there's a subsequent resolution that was adopted now, integrating all human rights defenders to be protected. I'm not sure it's resolution 3, 4 or something, but that resolution now, it recognized everyone. Because after coming from Angola, there was this resistance. The reprisals was increasing, even at the level of the African Commission, where the NGO Forum, participates and conducts its processes. We have seen state parties, like acting contradictory. We've seen that those organizations that had observer status working on sexual minority getting stripped off of their observer status. We've seen that the guidelines actually, what it did, it recognizes that in Angola, when you submit the papers for recognition of your organization, depositing that information to the registrar, automatically it's recognized as a formally registered. But there has been attempt to stop that, to go the rigorous route of registering, taking several months, and when it takes several months, you can't even open up a bank account, you can't do your job. If you do your job, you are recognized as a person who is operating illegal. We've seen them coming, interjecting the NGO forum. I think the African Center, they were imposed that we will have an engagement in your program of the civil society. We are going, Hannah had to give in. It was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, but some high-ranking official who dictated in the NGO forum processes that they will speak. And they will speak, they were lecturing to us like high school children, speaking to us in that tone, you know, that, but at that time we had already recognized that the policy in Angola is very progressive, where a person, by just merely submitting, you have qualified. Now they were coming to the African Commission, claiming that all those organizations from Angola are illegal, they're operating illegal, and the African Commission must remove their observer status. Others that have applied, their observer status has not been provided or granted. So we are very honored that some of you are in this platform that Hannah said to, the Lusophone platform. The Lusophone platform really, it helps because when you look at Angola, Mozambique, and other countries from members of the African continent speaking Lusophone, they seems to be not engaging on the issues, on the African issue, on the African platform. So visibility is being created, and you need to, as she has said, that engage in this, get yourself educated, participate in this. And yes, we do agree. I have said it many times that this government, Angola, they are shooting themselves on their feet. They have someone like Yushia de Silveira, the Kutakesha director, who has got the information. We have even recommended, they can even make the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission of the country. You know, so we need to continue opening doors because a lot has happened. And working with the African Commission is another, Commissioner Manuela as well, Special Rapporteur on Prisons. She needs to be contacted. We used to have a commissioner in my country, and I know in the Gambia as well, the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women. They have a commissioner there, and they are engaging because that person is a national of the Gambia or is the national of Angola. We had a special rapporteur before traveling to the African Commission. We had a civil society gathering. So she must not leave Angola and attend the session without engaging with the civil society. In that way, you are holding the special rapporteur accountable. Unfortunately, apparently she's busy, was not able to be with us today. But it is your role, it is your mandate. Whether they're busy, but you must find a way of engaging. By the time you speak there, she is already aware and familiar of the work that you are doing. Yeah, let me end up here because there's a lot that we have been covering at civil society and working together with others. We are advocating, for example, now for those laws in Zimbabwe and anywhere, especially after this money laundering, I don't know how to pronounce that, but this is a international regulating body that is monitoring corruption. Forcing now state parties, they want to force compulsory registration, and especially if you're an international organization. And then also your resources, your funding, you know, and we know that member states, especially the banks, I know that there is an article about Standard Bank in South Africa. It's supporting a project in Nigeria, ECOP, where there's issues of climate change, where there's issues of grave human rights violations, and they want to go there and support that project. Why is Standard Bank going there? It's because they don't know that we are here. They don't know that people like ourselves are around where we can speak and hold them accountable. This is just an example of how this money laundering, that they want to impose it, that the civil society are involved in some of the dubious practices or businesses when it is actually themselves. So we refuse in South Africa for anything that's got to do with the amendment of our bill and to comply, for South Africa to comply or to show its compliance to the international regulating bodies. So we should look and read and see how the state want to use us, as a scapegoat.
Muito obrigada, Ana. Muito obrigado, Carla. Vamos lá abrir então aqui uma sessão de discussões. Se calhar vamos 10 minutos, temos aí 10 minutos para frente. Já temos aí 2, 3, vamos fazer também 5 e vou pedir a vossa compreensão para priorizarmos aqueles colegas que não fizeram intervenções no primeiro painel e assim podermos todos participar. Já vejo aí 3, por favor. Sim. Microfone. Vou pedir também aos colegas para podermos ser sintéticos, permitirmos todos nós possamos participar. 2 minutos, por favor. 2 minutos mesmo.
Boa tarde a todas e todos. Chamo-me Elizabeth Campos André. Venho representar a Associação de Mulheres Portuguesas e Políticos, a SPP. E a questão que eu tenho é mais uma sugestão. Né? Nós já falamos que de conversa estamos todos cheios, e principalmente para nós aqui em Angola, né? Pelas questões que passam, pelas questões de reflexão que a sociedade civil passa, já se falou da lei, já se falou de quase tudo. E nós, além dos ativistas, temos 4 ativistas prévios, temos uma mulher também presa, né? Que é a Net Nahara, e nós, como a Organização de Mulheres que luta pelos direitos civis e políticos, temos importância, né? Precisamos que haja uma solução para que todos estejam e elas estejam fora, né, dessa questão. Mas a minha sugestão é exatamente na questão da parceria, que se calhar para que possamos fortificar a sociedade civil, né? Do jeito que os governos têm aquelas amizades, aquelas parcerias, né? Eu acho que se a sociedade civil de África, no geral, tivesse o mesmo tipo de engajamento, parcerias também, eu acho que muita coisa seria ultrapassada. Porque nós só continuamos assim fragilizados. Por quê? Porque nós não temos fundo. E cada vez mais usa-se estratégias para quê? Para continuar a enfraquecer ainda mais a sociedade civil. Mas os partidos é uma coisa completamente diferente. E tem essas ligações, partidos de Angola, partidos de Moçambique, partidos da Nigéria, do Quênia, da África toda. Então, o que precisamos se aliar para que as coisas vão mudando é que esse mesmo tipo de parceria que há nos partidos políticos haja também verdadeiramente na sociedade civil.
Obrigado.
Obrigado por uma boa a todos. Sou Luís Daniel Dominado, pela pessoa de visão. Indo na linha além da nossa colega, esta questão da parceria, ali a questão do apoio institucional e financeiro. A Comissão Africana trouxe aqui ideias que estão abertas a essa parceria, a esses apoios, sobretudo apoios institucionais. O que eu quero saber é, de fato, existe uma linha de financiamento para a sociedade civil, ou para as organizações da sociedade civil, registrada em África? Por outra, se existe, quais são os mecanismos que as mesmas organizações devem tomar para chegar até os mesmos financiamentos? Porque é aquilo que a colega já disse, um dos elementos que nos tem fragilizado é a falta de capacidade financeira para fazer face às necessidades que nos enviam. Então, isso é uma grande questão. Obrigado.
Obrigado. Boa tarde a todos e todas. Gilson Salucci é o meu nome. Como nós sabemos, não existe sociedade civil sem liberdade. Não existe defesa e luta pelos direitos humanos sem democracia real e efetiva. E a nossa realidade é atroz. Parece que encaminhamos para, efetivamente, a construção ou a consolidação do Estado autoritário por via legal em Angola. Já se falou aqui de manhã da proposta do novo Estatuto das ONGs, que procura cercear, que procura limitar, que procura tutelar a ação das ONGs. Mas também temos em discussão uma lei da segurança nacional, que de igual modo procura limitar, procura aquartelar as liberdades, direitos e garantias fundamentais. Pela experiência que tenho, e pergunto se terão lido, terão mantido contato com essas propostas, ou se, tendo em conta, obviamente, a experiência que têm, conhecem algum país em que há um órgão de Estado que passou a ser um polícia das organizações da sociedade civil. Esta é a minha questão. Obrigado. Eu sou memória política, defensora dos direitos humanos no âmbito. Gostava de fazer algumas perguntas, digamos, diretas. Em Angola tem duas regiões com a qual pedem independência por causa da maldição de recursos. Quando os governantes angolanos encontram recursos num determinado sítio, o povo é completamente escorraçado. Como pode ser a terceira, por se ter encontrado nele ouro, diamante e também materiais muito raros para telefones. Qual é a visão das Nações Uidas e da União Africana para revelar esses comportamentos colaborativos? A segunda pergunta, em relação à União Africana, como se classifica a União Africana em termos de intervenção na defesa do direito? De uma vez. A terceira, o que a União Africana faz quando a comunicação com os governantes faz? Fica parado, cola as fotos dos ditadores ou famílias? E a última questão, eram muitas. Os golpes de Estado que acontecem na África não acontecem sem sinais. O que faz as Nações Unidas e a União Africana para que o governo e governantes não cheguem ao limite dos seus povos para que haja um golpe de Estado? São essas questões. Muito obrigado.
5 questões. Acho que Ana ou Carol, eu não vi que não sobre isso.
We cannot speak for the African Union, but what we can say would be from experience, how we have seen the African Commission dealt with some of these issues. And I am talking about the African Commission, not the African Union Commission. And one of your questions, how can the AU, I mean the African Commission, be rated on human rights issues? The African Commission to my mind, has come a long way. This was a commission, like I said before, made up of ambassadors representing their countries, or even ministers of their countries. You found out that Chibi had also alluded to it, where in Algeria, when society spoke or criticized Algeria, they made sure that one of their ministers on the commission. So if any NGO dared to from Algeria or had information from Algeria speak up, then we make sure that you don't get the floor again. But we fought it, and we said ministers and ambassadors cannot be members of the commission. So that helped a bit. But that does not mean that we, at the African Commission, you have what we call GONGOs, government, non-governmental organizations. And these GONGOs, let me tell you, they are very strong. How? They have a lot of money. And they also have the force of government carrying them. So these people are being funded and they come in and they try to offset the mark that independent organizations are making. And let me say that, in fact, I was smiling when Odinkalu was talking about some of these states not liking people to criticize them, you know. But the forum was classified as a group, a platform that names and shames states. And because what people were saying was what was happening on ground in those countries, but then they saw it as shaming them. Some of them said, society, don't tell the truth. But they cannot exonerate themselves because the information that come out was very true. At some point in the campaign on Zimbabwe, I went into Zimbabwe twice on the Solidarity mission. And I get my visa on arrival. And I made sure I am not there more than 72 hours. By the time, because they knew my name, when they, at first when they see Hannah Foster, they expect to see a white old woman. But it's yes. So by the time they realize it's this ugly black lady that is causing us the problems, I am out. So you find out that even when their delegation comes to the session, you find out that even when you reach them, they don't want to talk to you. But for me, I went into Zimbabwe for those solidarity missions with other colleagues. And during one of them, we went through a time when the head of the trade union had his arm broken because of some fracas they had with the state. So because we are the ones going to speak on behalf of them, and I have to know it. So it is I cannot go and wait to see who told me, or it was him who told me. Yes, you can tell me, give me the information. Rest assured that I will also verify the information, so that when I stand there to speak on your behalf, I'm speaking with authority, knowing that what we are saying is the truth and nothing but the truth, and we don't want any extra dollars. But the commission has they make decisions and cannot make them. The one decision they made and they were selected was that they granted observer status to CAF. And some of the states decided on that. And now for the commission to grant observers to the women. Hey. There was a lot of pushing too. Civil society was like, oh, these are experts. These are professionals who know their line of work, and the decision they've made is within their mandate, and they followed the criteria for granting of observers. What? The AUC dug in their heels, and there was no other thing to do, I suppose. We were upset when they had to withdraw the status because they were in the right. Apart from that, the Commission has been doing marvelous work. The country rapporteurs have been trying. The mechanisms have also been doing their work. If you look at what they've been doing before now, even the cases, the communications that they've been working on, it has increased. So they are doing a lot of work, and they've even given opinions to the court in line with their mandate. What they need is more support and more vigilance from civil society to be able to tell them, hey, we are watching, and for them to know that civil society is watching, and there are certain things that are not accepted, and they should make sure that they make it right. The other question that I also wanted to pick on is how, what do you call it, corruption or even conflict or what is handled. Corruption is handled at the level of the African Union Commission. Although African Commission is also working on some of these issues, it is yet to come up with a mechanism for it. But basically, it's worked on at the level of the AUC. And strengthening partnerships. The strengthening of partnerships is something that is at the heart, at the core of the work that we do at the NGO Forum. And if you look at the special interest groups at the forum, they are aligned with the mechanisms of the African Commission, so that those mechanisms can have information from civil society working on the ground. Many times you find out that most of those people who are, or groups that are in those, we call them special interest groups, have been there since the beginning. And they have history with them to help the mechanism develop further. And we also have the mechanism itself in those special interest groups meetings that are held twice a year during the forum of NGOs. So that also enriches the partnership between civil society and the African Commission. What is also important for us to note is the fact that the forum has worked very closely with the Commission. Initially, we used to campaign in the corridors, and we were not allowed into the Commission. For some of us who don't even have observer status, we cannot enter, we cannot talk. But then amongst ourselves, we've come to an understanding that has enriched their experiences and encouraged a lot of them to get observer status. And to help, we have a core group that also helps them with their statements. And within the different organizations, you find out that based on their expertise, they come together. And when it's time to come up with a resolution or recommendation, we encourage them to put together what they want. Today, as we speak, as something that has come out of that partnership, is at every session of the African Commission, the NGOs are committed to make a statement. Tell me, in which of the other organs of the African Union Commission, the African Commission has done a lot. All the recommendations from the forum is reviewed as part of their outcome document to see what they can also take out and come up with resolutions. You find out that, especially in some of these trouble spots, for example, in Sudan, many times we've come up since 2003, when the people who work on Sudan come up and bring in we come up with a statement, a resolution. In most times, you find out that the African Commission also looks at what we have prepared and come up with a resolution on Sudan, on Eritrea, on Chad, on Mali, on Eswatini, and others. So for us, it is a space, it is a platform that we need to maintain. Once we lose that space, we will not be able to get the African Commission to listen to us. We know that the African Commission has been facing a lot of challenges from states and even from the EU. So we have to make sure that we hold on to that space. For a long time, we had challenges in terms of funding. And because of that, those challenges, because we were saying these NGOs, they just make noise. But then, when some of our resolutions and recommendations started coming out from the resolutions of the African Commission, then they started taking us seriously. And for us, we are not saying you should not go to the African court. What we are saying is that Africa is a continent of peoples. And it's a group of people who value dialogue. So we want to dialogue first before we go to court. Because we know once you go to court, we might not be talking to each other again. So we encourage dialogue, we encourage mediation, we encourage the fact that people need to sit together and try to resolve issues that could bring conflict into the society. So it's very important for us, as civil society, that is what we promote. But if it goes beyond a certain threshold, yes, we go to the court. And some of us who have litigation in their mandates do go to court. Yes, and if there are other organizations who have relevant information, then they provide. But partnership is core. You cannot have one organization. One tree does not make a forest. And I keep insisting that there is need for us to work together. And working together will also ensure that we also protect each other. I remember a particular story. There was this particular person from a particular country. He came because there was this burning issue in their country. And he started talking to people. That was his first time to the commission during the forum of NGOs. And he said he wanted to make a statement. He didn't, his organization does not have observer status. So there was this person who said to him, just go, if you talk to one of these people who have observer status, you can speak. Then somebody else said to him, if you want advice, go to the secretariat of the forum and they will tell you. So when he came, I asked him, and some of the allegations were very serious. So I said to him, you know what? Can you vouch that this information is correct? Make sure, go through it and tell me. If it is correct, give it to us. And we'll work with the drafting committee and we'll come up with it. I asked him, do you want to go home? He said, yes. Where is your family? He said, all at home. I said, you see this thing, if you read it in that commission, you will get into trouble. So now what I'm going to do was, I said, make 2 copies. One will go to the country rapporteur of that particular country, and the other one will go to the thematic rapporteur of that theme. And we made an extra copy to make sure that the chairperson of the African Commission knew what was And that was how we saved the life of that person. Because it was one of these countries, if he went home, he will be killed. How many times have we asked Lucia to come back to Banjul? Because they were following her in Dakar. He called, Hannah, you see, this man, I said, okay, come home, come back to Gambia. The commission was still going on, and we took her to the mandate folder and said, this is the report we have. We called her to come back. Please. So the special rapporteur had the responsibility to announce that there was a human rights defender from Angola who was being harassed and intimidated, and we want the delegation of Angola to make sure that she's safe, he or she is safe. And you know, they will now take the floor. No, we are not doing anything, but if we know who the person is, we will take care. So they say, okay, we'll do bilateral. So they will have bilateral with the country rapporteur. And that makes sure that we tell them that we know that you are doing this, so make sure you take care of it, because our eyes are on you. So working together, only working together can give you that insurance. Yes, I know some of us want to, hey, yes, Power Mike, you were able to do it, but in this work that we are doing today, one person can. People are saying, oh, Hannah, oh, Hannah. But if all of you were not working, can Hannah bravely stand up and champion the rights of civil society? No, I would not. So when we say we are doing, yes, we've made progress, it is because all of us have put in efforts to make sure that the voices of civil society, the voice of the voiceless, those people who are being, whose rights are being violated, that we are amplifying their voices. Otherwise, I cannot do it alone, and I'm sure Colette cannot do it alone. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I think Hannah has covered a lot. I'll just highlight where there were some issues that I feel that we can add. She emphasized the principle of partnership, collaboration. I think this one, I've seen it very impactful on matters such as where a state has deposited its report. Angola has submitted 2 reports, and we've seen how civil society partnered in putting together issues, because the African Charter has got how many articles? Is it over, we have Article 45, close to 60 articles. Now, if you, as Hannah says, that you are a tree and you think you can make a forest out of yourself, it's not gonna work. You're going to you are not an expert, you are not working on civil political rights, women, climate change and all that. So it is very important. We've seen how those state reports attracted civil society to put what we call a shadow report. So there is a shadow report now that the Angolan civil society is being busy with or have submitted to the African Commission. And recommendation, there's what we call concluding observations. After that submission of the civil society shadow report, the Commission sits and develop a plan of action of some sort, which is called the concluding observation. So we need to take that concluding observation, each organization selecting their area and using those outcomes for their own advocacy at a national level. So this is very, very important. And I wanted to mention that the 4 activists under detention that are incarcerated, I think continuous lobbying and sending appeals to the African Commission so that even the country rapporteur speak about it, raise it, put it in their country report. You need to know who is your country rapporteur, because you make your life easy. You do follow-ups with your country rapporteur. So that information is there, is available online. And Kutakesha and partners, I think they have that. And then the exchange program that I think Lucia mentioned she was running. There have been a number of activists from Angola coming to the African Commission. I remember there was another exchange program in South Africa. However, she mentioned that some of those activists are nowhere to be found. People have not come back, people have disappeared. So I think Hannah is right when she said that we need to be serious about taking this work. It requires a lot of resources, strength, commitment as well, and consistent. You don't come in today just because your issue was not prioritized, you leave, you do your own thing. So if you act like that, then the process is it becomes very, very slow and long. And then regarding the national security reason that they usually use to protect the security of the state by coming up with some of the laws. We've seen that happening a lot during COVID-19. And the African Commission adopted a resolution, and the NGO Forum as well. There are many resolutions that, so now what we do, Hannah, you didn't even mention that you just come back from Geneva, where you're pushing some of the resolutions that we adopted at the NGO Forum for the citizens of Sudan. So that process does not only end where we are in Africa. You can take the same recommendation resolution. So there was a pressure group that was in Geneva, and there are some adoption of some resolutions there, which the activists working on Sudan can share. But we do have a resolution which the African Commission is speaking and guiding the state how to go about developing laws that protect the national security and the interests of the citizens. And then also, issue of resources, as Hannah has meant, we come together in the partnership. I think there's partnership here. You know, we work together, we identify the funders, and we continuously submit proposals. There is no government, there is no organization that is just there with resources that can be given to civil society. We have to work very hard. We have to continue. Sometimes we are unsuccessful in securing the funding. So it is very, very important to know that collaborations and working together can result in benefits of getting resources. And I think there was a point about, does the Commission condemn coup d'etats and all that? And I've spoken to it. The countries that have committed their statement, if you go on the website of the African Commission, the Commission does condemn. And the civil society plays a part in sending those appeals, you know, and verification, as Hannah was saying, that we need to have accurate information. So it's very, very critical for that. Yeah. So the other questions, I think we can discuss maybe during lunch or outside, especially those that are directed to the African Commission and to the UN. We can only speak about our experience, but we can't speak about what they do. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
One very important point that we want is that of strengthening capacity. Somebody asked about that question. And let me say that it's one of the core activities of the center, and it's geared towards learning more about the human rights procedures at the regional and international level, and to ensure that you are able to engage better with the processes and the different procedures. This is organized at least once a year. And I also see some of the participants from last year's training that Utakesa held here. So in terms of building capacity, it can be done at the regional level, it can also be done in-house and at the national level. So we also have people that we've already trained. You have Emilio and others who've already been trained. And we pride ourselves at making sure that when they go back, they also train others who should be able to engage better. Okay? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ana. Thank you, Carmen. Vamos já à hora do almoço, estamos a ser pressionados. O restaurante, muito obrigado a todos por terem estado nesta primeira parte. Vamos então para o almoço, para regressarmos aí entre as 14h15 e depois temos aí apenas para reflexões, já para as conclusões. Depois, então, temos a aula magna às 17 na Universidade dos Uidas. Muito obrigado a todos, então, vamos ao almoço. Obrigado.
So we are done.
Companheiros, eu peço para que possamos mesmo tardar, porque os senhores estão a acionar bem o horário estabelecido. Então agradeço a vossa compreensão.
From the experience.